most distinguished speaker of today's event, Mr. Chinmaya Narayana, my colleagues and my dear students. Good evening and a warm welcome to all for the national level webinar on basics of mass spectrometry based proteomics. I find immense pleasure in introducing and welcoming our chief guest, Mr. Chinmaya Narayana, who accepted our invitation and sparing his valuable time with us. He has been involved in research work at various highly reputed research institutes like Origin Discovery Technologies Limited, Hyderabad, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and Center for Systems Biology and Molecular Medicine, Mangalore. He completed his MSc in Pharmacology at JSS University, Mysore in the year 2016. During that period, he was involved in the research work on evaluation of cucurbitacin triterpenoid enriched fraction of Myrmodica dioica fruit as cardioprotective agent. He started his work on proteomics in 2016 at Origin Discovery Technologies Limited, Hyderabad, where he developed the ligand binding interaction assays, interaction time kinetics, and site of binding studies using mass spectrometer. His other area of interest includes the study of metabolite identification and biotransformation pathways by using MSMS technique. Softwares like ChemSketch, ChemDraw were used to draw the structures, fragments, and modifications of metabolites. At IISc Bangalore, his research work included the proteomic analysis of snake venoms, human CSF, and other biological matrices using advanced bio-LC QTOF. At CSBMM, he was involved in a number of research projects like phosphotyrosine, O2 sample preparation, and data analysis of SILAC labeled cancer cell lysates. And he also developed a PRM method using EC NLC 1200 coupled to Orbitrap fusion mass spectrometer. And he also worked on multi-PTM proteogenomic analysis, also established data independent acquisition technique, and he was also involved in the identification of species-specific unique peptides for accurate detection of species in biological samples. Based on all this research work, Mr. Chinmaya Narayana has, to his credit, 7 research publications at this young age, all in high impact factor journals. He also have acquired skills in Python and Linux work environment, shotgun and bottom-up proteomics, targeted and untargeted proteomics, phosphoproteome analysis, etc. With this introduction, I would like to welcome a speaker once again on my behalf and the behalf of the institution. Thank you, Chaitanya, for accepting our invitation. I also would like to just a minute. I also would like to thank my friend Dr. Keshav Prasad, who is the Deputy Director and the Professor of Center for Systems Biology and Molecular Medicine, Mangalore, for extending his support for organizing this program. Thank you all, and you can start your program now. Over to you, Chaitanya.
Okay. Thank you, Shrikala, for that beautiful introduction. Hope all of you are doing fine in this, global pandemic situation. So, good afternoon, all. So, as ma'am has introduced me, myself Chinmaya, I'm doing my PhD here at Center for Systems Biology and Molecular Medicine under the guidance of Dr. T.S. Keshav Prasad. Before, doing my PhD, I was working in an industry, pharmaceutical R&D, called Origin Discovery Technologies, where I was, taking care of mass spectrometer and different experiments and assays. So let us get into the today's webinar, that is on basics of mass spectrometry based proteomics. So I'll let me share my presentation now. Okay, I think it is in now slide mode, right? Okay. I guess yesterday Mr. Santosh has explained about the genomics and different techniques used in the genomics and how this has helped to understand the genome and of different species as of now, and how it has evolved throughout the throughout last 2-3 decades. So coming to mass spectrometry based proteomics, I'll start with the omics part. So what exactly omics means, like why this terminology of is used, or this suffix is used with respect to gene, protein, and metabolites. So omics is nothing but a study of central dogma of cell. Like if you want to study gene or DNA, then it is called genomics. If you want to study proteins, their expression pattern, their different modifications, then you use proteomics. And if you want to study metabolites, like which are very small molecules, but they have very significant role in regulating different pathways of a cell or tissue, then you do metabolomics. In the end, all these different omics are integrated, and the approach of doing different omics comes under the section of systems biology. When we say systems biology, either we'll do genomics, proteomics, or metabolomics. Okay, so omics is nothing but a study of one set of components in a cell. Either it might be gene, protein, or metabolite. But when we try to compare this omics, which is a technique, okay, with the biological process, doesn't really happens in one sections. Like if you, let us say, if you study genomics, or if you do genomics, you'll be only trying to get the information of the DNA or the gene. Okay, but in a biological process, there are multiple components which are interconnected with each other. The DNA gets transcripted into RNA. RNA gets translated into protein. Then it has its effect on metabolites. In return, metabolite has its effect on DNA. So it's very complicated. But combining this omics techniques with the biological process is really crucial in understanding and deciphering the biology of any tissue or cell or a species. So this whole concept is called, or understood by the integrated biology approach. So let us see how we try to get the information or read this biological information. So in order to read anything, we use language. So in our daily communication, we use different language, but English is one of the most prominent one. As you can see over here, this is like a sentence without any space. Actually, it just tells, can you read this? So this is like just an English sentence, right? English has around 26 different characters, right? But whereas in the second example, you can see only numbers. Like these are like 10, 10, 10 in different combinations. So this language is understood only by computers. So that is called binary language, right? It has only 2 characters, that is 1 or 0. But how we try to read the biological information? Again, biological information varies according to the type of component or the type of molecule we are going to study. Where if you want to study genome, they contains ATGC sequences. Okay, so ATGC is nothing but adenine, thymine, guanine, or cytosine. Okay, so basically genome is understood with the help of 4 characters. Okay, but when it comes to protein or proteome, it is made up of different amino acids. There are basically 20 amino acids. Okay, so these amino acids are there in different combinations and different shapes in different proteins. So study like we can read these proteins with the help of these 20 amino acids. So this is how we try to read the biological information, similar to as that of the language what we communicate in on daily basis. Because whatever the information is there in a cell or in a tissue can only be converted into a human readable form. Okay, it can be visualized, but it cannot be translated or communicated to others just like that. We have to convert it into human readable form. So that is the reason why we have different types of numbers or symbols in understanding these informations, biological informations. So what is proteomics? So proteomics is nothing but a study of a proteome. So as you know that genome sequence gets transcripted into RNA sequence with the help of different transcription factors. Okay, and this RNA again doesn't do any activity as such. This RNA gets translated into proteins with the help of different enzymes, ribosomal enzymes, and other factors. And again, these translated proteins, don't have complete control over the activities of the cell. They should get converted into a complete functional form. Okay, here the role of post-translation modifications, its different structure and size of the protein matters. So what we try to get the information by doing proteomics is nothing but the we try to identify the proteins, how many proteins are there in a cell, and what are their expression pattern, and using that how and what are the modification they contain, and how they have their role on the cellular process or in different disease conditions or in a biology of a particular species. Okay. So again, I'll try to brush up a little bit about the genome part so that we can understand proteomics in a much better way. So I'll just I think yesterday Santosh might have covered all these things in detail, but anyway I'll just try to finish this part as soon as possible. So genome and what it is. Genome is a genetic information of the chromosomes of an organism or species. Okay, so this genome made up of DNA, which are in double strands. Okay, and this whole DNA consists of different sections which are considered as genes based on their activity or expression, and study of all these genes, whether they are showing any expression or not, is what we do in genomics. And what exactly we try to do in case of proteomics? As I told, protein or proteome is the protein complement of the genome. So when we try to say proteome, we are trying to refer to the proteins expressed to particular cell or particular species. Okay, which are the expression of the genome present in that cell. So studying the protein expression by a particular proteome is all what we do in proteome. Okay, and this term was used by Dr. Mark Wilkins in 1994. He was the first want to use this term called proteome or proteomics in 1994. So as I told, like in a nutshell, what we can say, proteomics is the characterization of proteome by qualitative or quantitative protein level measurements in order to understand the biological process and the systems. Okay. Now let us see what genome is made up of. I know we know that DNA is made up of 4 nucleotides: adenosine, guanosine, cytidine, and thymidine. Okay, but all these different components are connected to each other with the help of a sugar moiety and one phosphate group. So these ATGC are connected to each other in sequence in different combinations towards the genome. Okay, and what we try to detect these sequences with different techniques. So there are different techniques that have been come and got obsolete in this last 2-3 decades in the genome sequencing or genomics area. The first one was the capillary electrophoresis or its variations. Okay, capillary electrophoresis was the first technique was used to study the DNA or different SNPs. But over a period of time, a lot of variations have come. The next one was the agile electrophoresis labs or lab on a chip technologies, and more recently, a lot of HPLC techniques and gene array technologies, different sequencing, Illumina sequencing, PacBio, Sanger sequencing. So much have come in the market, and now genome sequencing has become very what I can say easy technique when compared to the proteome. Okay, so basically a genomics lab should consist of certain commercially installed instruments or equipments which can be supervised or used by some technicians or semi-skilled workers. Okay, and the chemistry of this genome or DNA is easy to understand because the molecules is made up of only 4 different nucleotides. So when we look at it in the perspective of chemistry, it is very easy going molecule. It can, because it gets solubilized in water easily. It can be analyzed by capillary electrophoresis or different array technologies, and in order to do all these genomics studies, we get different kits, commercially available kits, which can be directly procured from the vendors and can be used. You really don't have to prepare your own solvents or buffers. All these kits or chemical reagents are easily available. So because of its simple structure and easily solubilizable molecules. Whereas in case of proteomics lab, what we should have to do proteomics is either 2D gel electrophoresis, which is again an obsolete technique now, or mass spectrometry. Mass spectrometry has become a prominent or integral part of proteomic lab. So we'll get into the mass spec part later. So I'll just I'm just giving a brief introduction over here. And when it comes to the chemistry, when we try to look at into the protein or proteomics from the chemistry perspective, proteins are much dynamic in nature when we compare it with the DNA, and they're little trickier in handling because of their different combinations of amino acids and their solubility because all these amino acids, 20 amino acids will be there in different combination. So different proteins show different types of solubility. So not using one single solvent will not suffice our requirement. So we have to have different types of solubilizing agents, and one single technology is also not sufficient to understand the complete proteome of a cell. We have to different techniques or technology or instrument in order to study these proteins. because of their chemical properties or chemical structure. Uh, as I told, proteins are made up of basically 20 amino acids. So out of these 20, there are some which are non-polar in nature, like glycine, proline, alanine, where there are some polar in nature, like serine, threonine, and there are some in ionic nature, either they are basic or acidic. Okay, because of the different properties of these different amino acids, the complexity of the protein in terms of their chemistry, varies in different orders. So how these proteins are made up of, uh, they like they are made up of amino acids, but these amino acids are connected to each other with the help of a peptide bond. With peptide bond is nothing but a uh, basically a amino acid has one N-terminus or one amino group and one carboxyl group. Okay, the carboxyl group of the one amino acid is connected to the amino group of or N-terminus of the another amino acid, and this connection is called peptide bond. Okay, and because of this peptide bond, a complete protein molecule is formed. And why we have to study these proteins, and how these proteins, studying the protein has a relationship with transcriptomic or genomic. So when we try to study genome, or when we do a genomics experiment, we'll get the information about that species only at its genome level. When I say its genome level, we get to know what is the status of that species or their particular cell type. How many variations it has, or how many mutation it has, or how many genes it has. Okay, that is all we get to know. We don't get to know its expression, whether it is showing any activity in the cellular process or not. We don't get to know when we do genomics. What we can get is what is there in a cell, what it is written inside the genome. That's it. Whereas when we do transcriptomics, here also we get to know that what are those genes which are getting transcripted, but we are not sure about it, because again mRNA is not a functional moiety or functional group, okay, of the cell. It doesn't do any physical activity as such. Okay, it just it carries information from gene till it gets converted into a protein. Okay, so what all we get to know by doing transcriptomics is what might be happening in a cell or in a tissue or in a species. But when we study proteins or proteome, we for sure get to know what is happening exactly inside a cell, whether the cell is doing one activity or not. It by studying the DNA or mRNA, you might be expecting that particular cell is expressing one particular type of protein, but we cannot be sure until unless we don't identify that protein in a cell. So doing proteomics, or by studying proteome, we'll be for sure can say that what is happening in a cell or in a tissue or in a species. Because again, the genomics ignores the translational or post-translation levels of control in a cell. So, and also most of the drugs which are commercially available in markets has their activity on proteomics, not on genomics. In recent times, there are certain molecules came into market which have their activity on mRNA or DNA, but majority of the proteins has their activity on proteins. So studying these proteins is very important in order to study the different disease progression, or in order to see what exactly is happening in the cell. So when we try to study a proteome, we should know how many molecules are there in the proteome. So in order to understand this, we'll see how many genes are expressed in human genome. I'm just giving one example of human genome here. So till now, by using different techniques or different technologies, the scientists have, detected that there are around 20 to 25,000 expressed genes in human genome, whereas not all the cells express all these 20 or 25,000 genomes at a time. It is based on their requirement or their cell type. The cells show the expression of these genes. So on an average, around 5,000 to 10,000 genes are expressed in one cell type. But that doesn't mean that you're going there is going to be only 10,000 proteins, because one gene doesn't correspond to one protein. Because when we say gene is just a portion of the genome which has the potential to be a proteome by transcription and translation. But not all the sections of that gene gets transcripted or translated into a protein. Okay, sometimes one section of the gene gets transcripted and translated into a protein, sometimes the other section, or sometimes a combination of two. So because of this, you will get to see a lot of proteins which are just variations of each other with one or two amino acids, or in different combinations of amino acids, and corresponds to one single gene. So one gene corresponds to multiple proteins. Because of this, variation, or this multiplicity of the proteins, their number increases from their number varies in between 20,000 to 30,000 per cell type, and there are around 252 different cell types in humans. Just imagine the complexity and dynamics of these proteins when we compare it with the genomes or genomics. So basically, proteomics is nothing but a study of around 30,000 proteins in a cell or in cell type. So why we have to do proteomics again? As I told earlier, proteins are different alterations cannot be fully deduced with the help of DNA, and doing transcriptomics or studying RNA doesn't give you any information about the translational control, degradation, or turnover of these proteins. And there are certain tissues which are not suitable for the RNA expression analysis. And as I told, proteins are physiological or pathological active players. This is one of the main reason why we have to do proteomics, to understand the biological process in complete. And better understanding of genesis or progression of a disease can be done with the help of proteomics technique. And in recent times, because of the advance in different mass spectrometry based techniques or technology, we can also study different biomarkers, disease specific biomarkers, in order to detect the disease in early detection of the disease, and also for the monitoring of different antibody therapies which are used in cancer and all. So let us see what are the different techniques used in order to carry out this proteomics. Conventionally, people used to do proteomics with either with the help of chromatography based techniques like ion exchange chromatography, size explosion chromatography, affinity chromatography. So chromatography, as all we know, is basically an analytical technique used to separate two molecules or mixture of molecules, right? So proteins, as I told, individual protein has its own properties because of its different combination of amino acids and in different size and shape. Because of that, they can be easily separated by chromatography based techniques. And ELISA, right? ELISA is again a kind of colorimetry based assay where they can be detected with the help of some antibodies or antigens. And Western blotting. These are the conventional techniques. Still, people use ELISA and Western blotting and some chromatography-based techniques, but they have become obsolete because of the advancement in mass spectrometry or mass spec instruments. Uh, Mass spectrometry technique in combination with chromatography has become a powerful tool in order to study these proteins because of their in-depth identification of peptides or proteins, and also because of their sensitivity. Uh, that is the reason why if when you try to go through different proteomics paper, uh, there are hardly very few proteomics paper nowadays without mass spectrometry technique used in it. And when we want to study the expression pattern, or when we want to do a relative quantification of these proteins, we also carry out different types of labeling techniques. They are like ICAT, SciLac, ITRAC, okay, and TMT. These are all the different labeling techniques used to see the expression pattern of these proteins in different conditions or different cell types or different diseases. Okay, and there are other high throughput methods are also available, but these are all not used extensively because they are not robust or they are not sensitive enough, but they are used in order to study the structure of a protein. Mass spectrometry can give you what is the sequence, like what is the sequence of that protein, how many amino acid it has, and how it is expressing, but you cannot study the structure of the protein with the help of mass spectrometry as such. We need other techniques like XLA crystallography or NMR. Okay, and in the end, all the information what we get from these different techniques, we try to infer the information and get the biological information with the help of bioanalytical analysis. This bioinformatics has become a integral or core part of the any omics techniques. And when we try to see what are the different strategies used in mass spectrometry based protein identification or characterization, we get to see basically two different types of approaches. One is called bottom up approach, and one more is called top down approach. Right. So I'll just cover the top down first, because though top down has its own advantages in understanding the proteins, it lacks because of its disability to differentiate different protein structures in chromatography. Okay, what happens in top down is nothing but we are going to detect this protein, the intact protein as such. Protein, let us say, has a weight of 30,000 kilodaltons. We are going to detect that 30,000 kilodalton protein in the mass spectrometer as such. We are not going to break it down into smaller parts, but because of its large size, when there are, let's say, 5,000 proteins which are having molecular weight of let's say 5,000 to 1 lakh kilodalton, the chromatography technique what we have is not sufficient to differentiate them because of their size, because of their complexity, because of their aggregation together with different molecules. That chromatography technique is not sufficient to differentiate them, and because of that we cannot identify all these 5 to 10,000 proteins in their intact form. Okay, the only approach what we have today is by breaking this protein into smaller sequences which are called peptides. So this is done by bottom up proteomics approach. Okay, what we do here is we take complete protein or protein extraction from a species or a cell or a tissue type or even from plants. It has certain amount of protein, and we break this protein into smaller sequences of amino acids called peptides, with the help of enzymes or protease enzymes. Okay, the major in the one enzyme which is used extensively is called trypsin. Okay, so it breaks these proteins into smaller amino acid sequences called peptides. Because of this smaller amino acid sequence, the complexity of this complete proteome reduces, and it can be easily separated with the help of chromatography techniques. And because of this separation based on their either based on their charge state or hydrophobicity, they can easily identified by mass spectrometers. They can easily fragmented and annotated. Their sequence, the sequence of that peptide can be performed with the help of mass spectrometer. And again, these peptides can be inferred back to the proteins because they using their unique unique amino acid sequence and so many other approaches. So what are the when we say what are the basic techniques used in identifying proteins in mass spectrometry are bottom up proteomics or top down proteomics. Yes. Again, here what, as I told, bottom up proteomics, we try to identify the peptides of a protein. Okay, after its proteolytic digestion. Example is trypsin. In case of top down, we don't do this proteolytic digestion. We directly take these proteins and try to detect them in mass spectrometers. There are experiments where we break them into smaller parts inside the mass spectrometer, but it is not widely used like bottom up proteomics. So how people used to use this mass spectrometry earlier, back in 1990s or before that. Usually what they used to do was they used to take the samples. Let us take an example of healthy and disease condition person. They used to take the samples. They used to run a 2D gel. They used to find the spots. So here, when we run a gel or gel electrophoresis, we are going to get the protein bands based on their molecular weight. The protein which is having large molecular weight will not travel for longer distance. The protein which is having very small molecular weight travels for longer distance in a gel. So based on that concept, we used to differentiate these proteins or type of proteins, and we used to compare them between the healthy or the controlled condition, and we are going to take the spots which are unique to that particular gel slab or condition, and these protein bands or protein spots are digested or directly acquired in MALDI-TOF instrument to see which is that protein which is getting expressed in one condition, either it might be healthy or disease condition. And they used to have different database search techniques or different tagging techniques in order to see their expression, in order to know whether it's a known protein or unknown protein. Okay, this is how people used to do the proteomics using mass spectrometry back in 1980s or 1990s. But what happened in 1990s and later on was that people came with newer technologies called orbit trap and ionization technique called ESI. Because of this, the identification of proteins directly from the sample has become more easier than doing the 2D gels. Because 2D gels, the 2D gel was giving an information of molecular mass, its isoelectric point of the protein, its relative abundance when it compared with the control or healthy state. Sometimes they used to give the different post-translation modification or its isoforms and their subcellular localization. But they used to have their own lackness, limitations, such as it was time consuming, labor intensive. Not everyone was able to carry or this 2D gel electrophoresis, and most staining techniques used to give only a moderate to high abundant proteins. The low abundant proteins were not at all able to get detected by 2D gel electrophoresis. And because of this, because of the variation in the solubility of proteins, not all the proteins were able to get separated by these 2D gels, and most of the membrane proteins like are the targets of most of the therapeutic drugs even now. And membrane proteins are very difficult to handle, even in case of mass spectrometry based proteins, because of their solubility factor. So because of the limitation of the 2D gel, people have completely removed that 2D gel part and have developed the techniques to identify these proteins or peptides directly from the sample after their digestion by acquiring it in mass spectrometer. So what are we doing in today's proteomics experiment is nothing but isolation of protein from a sample. Either it might be cell, tissue, plant, or some microorganism, yeast, okay, anything, any biological sample. We isolate these proteins. We break these proteins into smaller amino acids called peptides with the help of some enzymes like trypsin, chymotrypsin, lysine, pepsin. There are so many, and all these peptides are acquired in LC-MS. LC stands for liquid chromatography and MS stands for mass spectrometry. Okay, and over here we fragment these peptides into smaller fragments of amino acids, and this information is used for database search. So this is what we do in today's proteomics experiment, and this takes on an average 1 or 2 days of experimental work to completely do the proteomics of one single cell or type. And there are different fractionation strategies also implemented in between this proteomic experiment to reduce the complexity. So they're like isoelectric point based separation, molecular weight based separation, or affinity based separation, and gel free based separation also used extensively. They are like SCX, that stands for strong cation exchange, SAX, strong anion exchange, reverse phase liquid chromatography, and 2DLC techniques, which are used extensively for the fractionation of these protein or peptide samples, peptide mixtures, to reduce their complexity, so that we can do an in-depth proteomics experiment. We can identify maximum as many proteins as possible in a cell or cell type. So in today's proteome experiment, or with the help of today's techniques, we can detect around 10 to 15,000 proteins by doing all these different types of fractionation methods and acquisition techniques. So that is the ability of the proteomics in today's scenario. So what happens when we do enzymatic digestion? So as you can see over here, trypsin, chymotrypsin, lysine, ASPN, CNBR are different enzymatic. CNBR is a chemical actually, and other four are protease enzymes, proteins, which have the ability to break proteins into smaller sections called peptides at different amino acid, there are different amino acid junctions. For example, trypsin. Trypsin is one of the highly used or recommended protease enzyme, which cleaves proteins at C terminus of arginine or lysine. Okay, whereas chymotrypsin also breaks at lysine arginine, but it has other amino acid positions where it shows its activity as well. So all these enzymes are used just to break the protein into smaller amino acid sequences called peptides. So that is the role of enzymatic digestion. This is very crucial in bottom-up proteomics, whereas in top-down proteomics, we really don't do any sort of digestion. We directly try to identify the protein as such, the intact. They are called intact proteins. Okay, now I think I have covered the about protein, why we have to do proteomics, and what proteomics is mainly consist of, right? Uh, Before going further, we have to. It's very crucial to understand the mass spectrometry part also, because of because the intrinsic nature of this mass spectrometer in proteomics, we can't completely remove the cannot imagine proteomics without mass spectrometry. So what is a mass spectrometer? It is a highly powerful tool for protein identification and quantification. Okay, uh, and what this mass spectrometer really do or does is it detects the molecular weight of a molecule. Okay, it can be a chemical molecule, it can be any synthetic molecule, it can be peptide or it can be lipid. Okay, it can be some polymer. What mass spectrometer does is it detects this particular analyte or analyte of interest by detect by measuring its molecular weight. But this molecular weight is doesn't get measured as such. In order for the mass spectrometer to detect an analyte, it should carry some charge, because a molecule which doesn't carry any charge cannot be detected by the mass spectrometer. It should carry some charge. So because it carries some charge, either it is positive charge or negative charge, the molecular weight is referred with the help of mass to charge ratio. That is in general m by z value. So in general, when we do mass spectrometry, we detect these peptides with the unit m by z. Okay, and what are the mass measurements good for? Mass with the help of this, mass measurement or molecular weight detection, we can identify a molecule, we can verify it, we can quantify it. Okay, and it can be applied for any molecule. As I told, metabolite, protein, small molecules, synthetic molecules, polymers, any molecule it can be, until unless it gets it carries charge or it gets such charge, and it can be detected by the mass spectrometer. It can be identified by mass spectrometer. It can be verified by mass spectrometer, and it can be quantitated by the mass spectrometer. So So as I told, mass spectrometry is nothing but a detection of a mass, okay, which is an analytical technique. Here, ions which are having different molecular weight are separated based on their mass to charge ratio. That means how much of charge one particular molecule or analyte carries when it gets inside the mass spectrometer. Based on this m by z value, we detect these molecules and verify or quantify them. So what exactly is mass? When I say molecular weight, what exactly molecular weight? Molecular weight is nothing. Molecular weight of a molecule is nothing but a sum of different elements of that molecules. Let us say water. Let us take an example of water, which has the chemical formula is H2O. It has 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. So the hydrogen has the molecular weight of 1 Dalton, and oxygen has the molecular weight of 16 Dalton. So there are 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. That means 1 plus 1, 2, and oxygen has molecular weight of 16 Dalton. So in total, the molecular weight of water is 18 Dalton. So what we are trying to do by mass spectrometry is to detect this particular molecular weight, that is 18 Dalton, in mass spectrometer when we want to detect water molecules, right? But because of the advances in the technology, the today's mass spectrometry or mass spectrometers can also detect molecules either at their average mass level or at their monoisotopic mass level. When we say monoisotopic mass, uh, see, though we say that hydrogen, the molecular weight of hydrogen is 1 Dalton. When we look at it closely, the actual molecular weight is not 1 Dalton. It is 1.0078. Similarly, other elements have their own monoisotopic mass. Okay, so detecting this monoisotopic mass is very crucial when we do very complex experiments like proteomics, lipidomics, or metabolomics, because a small variation in the composition uh, of that molecule completely shifts its decimal value. uh, Maybe at the average mass level you cannot differentiate them. You can say it's just molecule A, but when we try to understand that them at their monoisotopic mass level, you can differentiate with the help of difference in the decimals. Because of this difference in the monoisotopic mass, they can be differentiated in mass spectrometers, then they can be detected. Okay, and these are some of the concepts which is not really required right now for you people to understand the concept of proteomics. But yes, they are essential in order to do in order to carry out this experiment in a lab. These are like isotopic cluster, Bayesian chart determination, accuracy, resolution or resolving power of a mass spectrometer. So I'll not go in depth about these concepts because they like they have their own technical things which needs a lot of explanation. And what we do basically in mass spectrometer or mass spectrometry experiment is whatever the sample which is an input for us will be introduced to the mass spectrometer. First, it is ionized. Okay, in the ionization source, and they are separated with the help of analyzers. Okay, and these separated or these molecules which are separated in the analyzer are detected by the detector, and whatever the M by Z value gets detected in the detector will be taken for data analysis. This is all what mass spectrometry does. So this is one basic schematic representation of a mass spectrometer. As I told, the sample inlet, either it might be direct infusion where you are directly taking a solvent and injecting into a mass spectrometer, or you can use different liquid chromatography techniques, okay, or like HPLC, UPLC, nano-LC, or you can also use liquid chromatography, sorry, gas chromatography technique, or uh, different separation technique like capillary electrophoresis. These are the different separation techniques used to take the sample inside the mass spectrometer with the separation from one another. And this molecule, when it gets inside, it gets ionized in the ion source. Again, there are so many different type of ionization techniques like MALDI, ESI, EI, CI, APCI, lot of them are there. And once it gets ionized, it will be separated by different analyzers. They are like time of flight, like in short, it is called TOF, quadrupole, ion trap, Fourier transform mass spectrometry analyzer, and after the after the separation, they will be detected by the detectors. Again, there are different types of detectors. Okay, these are all different components, but in general, there are mainly three components in a mass spectrometer, that is ion source, analyzer, and detector. Okay. Yeah, as I told, there are different ion sources: electron impact, chemical ionization, fast atom bombardment, electrospray ionization, MALDI, and different analyzers, quadrupole, magnetic sector, electric sector, ion trap, ion cyclotron, and different detectors, Faraday cup, secondary. So there are so many, technical things here. But the basic structure of a mass spectrometer is that it should have an ion source, it should have a mass analyzer, and it should have a detector to detect the analyte or molecule. So when we try to see the evolution of this mass spectrometry, people invented this detector early in 1906 or 1922. Sir J.J. Thomson, he won a Nobel Prize in 1906. He invented Faraday cap. Okay, that is the reason when you try to read different papers where they use Thomson as a unit to for a MIZ. Instead of using MIZ, they use Thomson. Okay. And one more person, scientist Francis William Aston, he also won Nobel Prize in 1922 for the detection of, I think, electron multiplier. Okay, and after that, it was Wolfgang Paul who invented ion trap. He won Nobel Prize in 1989. Okay, for physics. And in recent times, John B. Fenn and Koichi Tanaka won the Nobel Prize for the invention of ESI ion source. That is nothing but electrospray ionization technique. Okay. So let us see what happens inside a mass spectrometer. We know that it should get ionized in the ion source. It should be separated by the analyzer, and it will be detected by. So when we try to see what happens when we do proteomics or when we pass a peptide molecule inside a mass spectrometer. So as you can see here, okay. As you can see here, this is one peptide sequence, okay, which has a molecular weight of, let us say, 2058. When it gets ionized in the ion source, this peptide sequence, which is having molecular weight of 2058 Dalton, doesn't really get, get inside the mass spectrometer with this particular molecular weight, because based on its number of charge or number of protein it carries, the MIZ of this peptide varies. When if it let us say if it has two charge states, the MIZ of that molecule will be 1030 Daltons. If it carries 3 charge or 3 protons, it will have the MIZ value of 687.19 Dalton. If it or MIZ, if it carries 4 charge or 4 proton, it will have the MIZ value of 515.645 MIZ. Okay. Out of these different charge state of a molecule, sometimes all of them will get inside the mass spectrometer, or only one of it, and it will be separated from the rest of the analyte in Q1. Q1, either it might be a quadrupole, ion trap. It depends upon the mass spectrometry you are using. Okay, it will be separated from the rest of the molecules or the rest of the analytes, and it will be fragmented in a collision cell. Okay, when we fragment it, let us say the sequence over here is like there are 10 amino acids in this peptide. Okay, when the peptide gets fragmented, the fragmentation is random. There is no control over here. We cannot fragment. We cannot say that I just want to fragment the second amino acid. When we try to fragment a peptide or any molecule for that matter, it gets fragmented at different locations of that molecule. So when we fragment this peptide, it will get fragmented at different junctions of the amino acids, and these fragments will be detected or again monitored by the mass spectrometer, and what we get is just a peak, MyZ peak of these molecules, okay, which corresponds to a certain fragment of the peptide, and which this is what happens basically inside a mass spectrometer when we do the acquisition or sample analysis. So when we try to see the peptide fragmentation in depth, so as you can see here, there are three amino acids, or this is called peptide backbone, okay, which are connected by peptide bond. Okay. So this is what we say peptide bond, okay, where carboxylic group, this is one carboxylic group which doesn't have doesn't carry oxygen here, of one amino acid connected with the amine group. This is one more amino group of another amino acid. Okay, so when we try to fragment these peptides inside a mass spectrometer, they usually get fragmented or broken down at different junctions of a chemical or of a peptide. Okay, if it gets broken between a peptide bond, then you will get B ion or Y ion. Okay, so why when we call it as a B ion or when we call it as a Y ion is if a molecule has its amine group or N terminus intact, then it is called B ion. As you can see here, the amine group is intact. Okay, so you can see this is the amine group for this particular amino acid. Okay, which is intact in when it gets fragmented. So then we call it as a B ion. So that is the reason why there is a this particular shape over here, which corresponds to B ion. That means the N terminus or amine group of that amino acid is intact, which is not broken. But when the C terminus is intact, whereas here, or you can take this complete section, you can see this is the C terminus, the carboxylic group, where it is intact. Then it is called Y ion. Okay, and there are different other ions also, A ion, C ion, X ion, but they are not as important as B and Y ions, because the type of ion, fragmentation ion, is a result of different type of fragmentation techniques we use, like HCD, CID, ETD. Okay, so basically what we get when we pass a peptide inside a mass spectrometer, it will be detected first, then it will be fragmented. Okay, and when it gets fragmented, its amino acid sequences are broken at their peptide bond level, and different ion series, B or Y ions, are acquired. Okay, so when I say it gets fragmented only not only at this particular junction. It will get fragmented here also. It will get fragmented here also. So it depends on the length of the peptide and its number of peptides. Okay. So this is just one more example here. How we interpret its fragmentation pattern. As I told, see, we have different ion series like B ion and Y ion series. So if there is this is the peptide SGFLEEDELK. Okay, if only the S, that S is nothing but serine. If amino acid serine gets fragmented, then it is B1 ion. Okay, and if SG, that means nothing but serine and glycine gets fragmented, and if you detect this serine and glycine peak in the mass spectrometer, then it is called B2 ion. Okay. Similarly, over here also we have, if you can detect a peak which corresponds to lysine, that is 147 MyZ value, then it is called Y ion. If you can detect a MyZ of 260 which corresponds to lysine plus leucine, then it is called Y2 ion. So as I told, if the N terminus is intact, so this is the N terminus, okay, this is the C terminus. If the N terminus is intact, then these are called B series ions or B ions. If the C terminus is intact, then it is called Y ions. Okay, these are the different types of ions what we get when we fragment a peptide molecule. So what we get? So this is just one example spectra. Okay, like there are lot of fragments. We don't know what are these fragments. Okay, when we see a actual spectra in a mass spectrometer, we really cannot differentiate whether it's a B ion or Y ion. We have to do manual work in order to. But when we have complex spectra, like you can see, there are a lot of ions over in this junction, right? But manually detecting these ions by manual interpretation is not easy task. So we have to have computational techniques or bioinformatic techniques to detect the information from this complex spectra. So what we do is here, so we search the spectra against the proteome database, and by using different algorithms or different computational techniques, and which tells us what are these ions, which correspond, what are these fragments, and where they correspond in a peptide sequence. Okay, as you can see, this particular spectra, when we search against a proteome database, it tells whether this particular peak corresponds to B ion or Y ion, whether it is Y10, Y9, or what are the ion series it corresponds to, and how based on that information we can say the sequence, we can detect this peptide sequence, and we can say that this particular fragmentation or this particular MS spectra corresponds to this particular peptide, and this particular peptide sequence corresponds to particular protein sequence or protein, and that is how we detect the mass spectra information to protein. So using these techniques, what have we achieved till now? So this is one of the study which got published in 2014 by by one of our Dr. Keshav Prasad's team and Akhilesh Pandey team with the help of people from Johns Hopkins also, where they have studied around 17 adult tissues of human, 7 fetal tissues, and 6 purified primary hematopoietic cells, and using mass spectrometry based proteomics technique, where they have detected proteins which encodes to around 17,000 genes. Okay, and they were able to cover almost 80%, 84% of the protein coding genes in human. So this is one of the biggest study which has been carried out using proteomics techniques to understand the human proteome or the expression of proteins in human proteome. Okay, and it got published in 2014, and it was a cover page of Nature journal. Okay, and using the same approach, we have also carried out human brain proteome map, where we have studied around 32 different regions of human brain. Okay, and we studied the number of proteins present in these different human brain regions, and we have also studied their expression pattern, not only at different regions of the brain, also at different age groups. We studied their expression in prenatal babies, infants, children's, adult, and geriatric also. So using the mass spectrometry based proteomic techniques, we were able to identify around 13,000 proteins in brain and their expression patterns in different regions and also in different age groups. So yeah, and how this proteomics is used in current scenario, like as all of you know that corona pandemic has taken over almost everyday life of almost everyone, right? but this proteomics techniques was used for the drug repurposing, where what they had done was they took the infected cell, corona infected cell or SARS CoV-2 infected cells, and they have studied the interaction of these coronavirus proteins with cell proteins, and they studied how we can use the currently available drugs which are there in market in order to block the interaction of viral protein with the host protein or the human proteins. This it got published in Nature in 2020. Okay, where they have detected that around 69 different drugs, okay, which can be used as drug repurposing, and this whole experiment was carried out with proteomics technique. And with the advancement of technology, now what people or the scientists are claiming that we can identify and quantify around 10,000 proteins in one single run. Okay, so that is the level of technological advancement what people have achieved as of now. Earlier, we had to do a lot of fractionation, lot of separation techniques in order to detect these many proteins. But with today's technique and technology, we can identify around 10,000 proteins and quantify them in one single run. And there is one more recent paper by Jesse G. Meir, where they have directly infused the protein sample to a mass spectrometer without the help of liquid chromatography or any separation technique, and they were able to carry out the acquisition of around they have quantified around 500 proteins, and they did it in almost 4.4 hours. They I think they just acquired these proteins for a minute or two. Okay, so acquired these samples for a minute or two. So that is one more technological advancement what people have achieved using the and where they have used proteomics. And this is the mass spectrometer we have in our lab. Okay, and using this we have carried out several proteomics experiment, biomarker studies, and even the human brain proteome what I have shown you was mainly performed using this mass spectrometer. So I hope almost major part of the proteomics I was able to cover, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
If you have any questions or doubts, please feel free to ask.
Yes, sir. I have some doubts, sir.
Yes, yes.
Actually, Sri, sir, I'm working in this biotechnology department, sir.
Okay.
Actually, I'm asking regarding the protein workflow, right? You are comparing the proteins from normal person and the diseased person, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, actually, how the procedure will be now? I want to know that. How do you collect the samples and what techniques you will do for that?
Yes. I'll just show you this representation. It will be easy. Yes. Yep. What also just get rid of this 2D gel electrophoresis part because we really don't use it here. So what we take is, let us say if you want to study the biomarker present in the disease condition, okay, and in order to say a molecule as a biomarker, we should also have the control part. Either it may be from a healthy patient or it may be from a patient where he doesn't have that particular disease. We're going to take the sample, either it might be blood or serum or urine sample. We will subject it to trypsin digestion. Okay, we break them down, these proteins from these individual samples into peptides, and we'll acquire it in mass spectrometer. So when we acquire individual samples separately. We're not going to pool it. So that we'll get the different types of proteins present in different samples, individual samples, and their expression pattern also. And using this information, we'll try to deduce whether there are any biomarkers present for that particular disease, if it is there, and what is its expression, whether it is getting upregulated or downregulated, and all those things.
Actually, sir, should we compare with the same person? Healthy and disease mean the same person?
Not necessary, because if he carries some disease, how can you compare with the same person?
Yeah, already I am infected mean how I want to know about myself. Already I am infected.
Yeah.
Disease.
See, if you are infected already with some infection or some disease, then in order to differentiate proteins or expression of proteins in you have to compare it with the control group or the healthy one. So you cannot compare your sample with your own sample. You have to have some control or someone else with your same age group or your same physical characteristics, where you can compare.
You can compare with some same age group people.
Yes.
Not any. There will be no any blood relation. Not like.
Yes.
Okay.
Students, anybody, if you have any doubt for clarification, it's time for discussion. I could saw some hands rising now between. Anju? You want to ask any questions? I think you raised your hand in between.
I know it was cleared later on. When he slowed the next slide, it was cleared.
Okay. If you have any doubt, you can just ask. Chaitanya, it was a wonderful presentation.
Thank
anyway,
you.
You have covered starting from evolution of proteomics, actually from sample preparation and introduction of sample to the mass spec, and basically whatever how the mass spec is analyzing the sample, ionization process, everything. I think almost everywhere you have touched the basic as well as the recent aspect, how it is coming to the recent. You are taking the result to the future. Okay.
Yes,
so I think the students are actually benefited with this talk, and they have an overview. If you have any suggestions or any advice to give our students about the future opportunities and all, you can just give them some guidance.
Yes. What I can say is that if they are curious enough, there is a lot of opportunity in the field of systems biology. They can. I'm not saying that they have to only choose proteomics. They can also do a lot of genomics, metabolomics, which is getting a lot of significance in the systems biology field. Metabolomics is really gaining a lot of importance nowadays. So there is so much to study. There is so much technology getting advanced. So yeah, students can have a lot of opportunities in this field.
Yes. Whoever whoever wish to study further and go for research and all, no, it will be a really
Yes,
motivation
yes, yes,
for them. That is why
yes.
I just want to give because at UG level I know this is little, but still I think many of them can understand the concepts and all.
Yes,
So
I
they
think
had done it well.
the what exactly proteomics is all about, I hope they might have understood.
Yes.
But mass spectrometry part is little trickier. It has a lot of technical things over there. I don't think most of them might have understood it. So I kept that part as less as possible because
I will ask them to attend some workshops and all
yes,
when you're
yes,
organizing. No?
yes, yes,
I
sure,
will share the link to the students and let them, if they visibly see the things going on now, so it will
yes,
be
yes,
easier for them. Okay, thank you very much. And I
yes.
will just hand over as our assistant professor, Dr. Sridhar, will give the vote of thanks.
Okay, okay.
Uh, Good evening to all. Good evening to the honorable speaker, respected HOD, faculties and students. First of all, I would like to thank the respected secretary sir and beloved principal sir of AJK College of Arts and Science for giving us this opportunity to organize this webinar in our department. On behalf of the entire institute, department, biotechnology association, right, I would like to extend my gratitude to the chief guest, Mr. Chinmaya Narayana, for accepting this. So, our invitation and delivering the speech on the topic basics of mass spectrometry based proteomics. I am sure that our students will be definitely benefited by this opportunity. I also express my gratitude to Dr. Kesava Prasad, Professor and Director, Center for Systems Biology and Molecular Medicine, Yenopoya Research Center, IOB Center, Mangalore, India, for encouraging and motivating the students for facilitating and supporting our department by sharing your vast knowledge and ideology. Thank you very much, sir. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to all the guests present today. I would like to thank the students committee and the support staff for the complete preparation of this program. I have also obligated to the parents presented here. Your participation and suggestion always helps us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.